Hello and welcome to another talk about Stoicism. And I thought what we would do today is talk about death, doom, and destruction. This is a very interesting time in the history of the human species, where there's what appears to be a completely pointless war that broke out in the Ukraine. And it made me think a lot. So I thought what I would do today is put Seneca on hold for a week. We'll return to him next week and talk about these feelings and thoughts that I have had, and that I'm sure that a lot of people have had as well, but try to reason through them from a Stoic perspective. So when a war like that breaks out, and you know that at least one of the parties that's involved has nuclear weapons and is very aggressive, that's a very scary thing. It's a scary thing, and I think many people feel a bit apprehensive, to say the least, at this point in time. And that got me thinking, because at some point I really found myself getting quite anxious and thinking about what will happen. I mean, who has not at least had those thoughts for a couple minutes, I would say, right, at this time? What would happen? How will this end? How will this pan out? And I found myself quite anxious and thinking thoughts like, but I kind of like my life. What if it all ends? What if it all comes crashing to a halt? What if this is the end of humankind? Which may be a bit dramatic, but let's be fair. If something like an actual all-out nuclear war happens, I'm not saying that we're there yet, but if something like that happens, it's not exactly unthinkable that will be the end of the human species. So there I was, sitting, not quite quivering in a corner, but definitely being a bit anxious, which I think is quite normal under such circumstances. Is it not? Right? And then I thought to myself, but at times like these, you should really think back to the Stoics, because this is when Stoicism might be useful. If you are in mental turmoil, which may well be justified, but if you are in mental turmoil, what could you do? So I thought that's what I would discuss today. My view on that, right? Stoicism actually came into its own in an interesting period in history. This is when the Peloponnesian Wars had taken place. And if your history is somewhat rusty, then let me say this was an era where Greece basically fell apart. It fell apart. You first have Alexander the Great, who has conquered a lot of the known world, right? The known world at that time. And when he dies, that whole empire starts to fall apart. USSR. Now, then you have the Peloponnesian Wars. Greece falls apart even more. So it's when Stoicism is really developed and comes to fruition, that is a period where the world, the known world at that time, and this is not a great term, but I mean the known world of the West, where that philosophy was developed, that world is more or less falling apart. It's a time of war, of civil unrest, of all these kinds of things. And then there are philosophers like the Cynics and the Stoics, and many other schools. But, you know, this is called talking about Stoicism, isn't it? So the Stoics provide a very systematic framework for thinking about the world and for teaching people how to live in exactly those circumstances of great uncertainty. And I think we can use a little bit of that right now. And when I realized that, when I kind of put that together, I thought that's kind of where we are now. Like we have, I'm not saying the world is falling apart, but I mean we live in an increasingly complicated world. We had to deal with a lot. There was first a pandemic, and that's still more or less going on, but that seems to be snowed under a little bit right now. But I mean, it's not like it's completely gone. It's not like there's no coronavirus out there anymore. Then there is the tragic situation in the Ukraine. Who knows what's next, right? I'm like, you can place bets. Is it an alien invasion? Is it an asteroid that will wipe out? What will happen, right? Anyway, so making sense of that world that is increasingly complex, and that's also, let's be frank, that's in many ways a fairly scary place. What do you do? What do you do? And then I had this thought, which I don't know if it's useful, but I thought I'd share it anyway. Then I thought to myself, it is simply a fact that the human species is not forever. I think statistically it is much more probable that our species will at some time end than that it will perpetuate itself, than that it will be forever. And it doesn't necessarily take much. Think of the dinosaurs, who were known as fairly tough customers. One meteorite, all it took, and they were wiped out. Something like that, some sort of event, whether that is a gradual event or whether that is one big cataclysmic event, is likely to, at some point, end human species. This is not doomsday prophecies. This is just a very realistic option, whether that is an all-out nuclear war or whether that is because a meteorite of sufficient size hits us. And of course the dinosaurs didn't have the technology we do, but even so, big enough object on a ram course, which by the way happens all the time, right? Like meteor strikes all the time, except often they're small enough, they largely burn up in the atmosphere and we don't really notice much. But it happens. It's just a matter of time for the right object to line up with the course of the Earth and hit us. And if it's big enough, it'll destroy all life, or most life, and then the rest may taper out gradually. Who knows what'll happen, right? Or again, a nuclear war, or a pandemic of something that's worse than a coronavirus, or all the monkeys will turn against us. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, at some point, and that may not be tomorrow, that may not be in 100 years, that may not be in 1,000 years, but at some point, something is likely to happen that is going to have a very negative impact on the human species, namely wipe us out. I think something like 150 species die every day. They're already going extinct. They're no longer the fittest, and therefore they don't survive. They don't whatever, their habitat is threatened. Whatever happened, they die every day. Think about that. And then I also thought, if you take that as an assumption, in my mind a realistic assumption, the human species is not forever, how do you reason from that? And what would a Stoic say? Well, again, the Stoics lived through when Stoicism was invented, when it was thought up as a system, when it was reasoned through, the Stoics in ancient Greece lived through a period of tremendous turmoil. And they came up with sensible ways in my mind to think about that situation, such as some things are not within your control. Let's say that it is an asteroid that does us in. A massive asteroid, huge. There's nothing we can do. We can't break it down. We can't do anything. It's going to hit the Earth. And shortly after that, all life is extinguished. It's not within your control, is it? There's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do. It's just going to happen. It's an unpleasant thing to look at, but this is where Stoicism comes in. Epictetus, chapter 1 of the Enchiridion, some things are within your control, other things are not within your control. Something as massive and cataclysmic as that is not within your control. Then why worry? Then why be concerned? Stoicism lies in developing apatheia. Apatheia, indeed, where we got apathy, but not exactly the same. Apatheia means an ability to distance yourself from negative passions, from bad emotions, anger, frustration, those kinds of things, so that they don't upset you. The true sophos, the true sage that the Stoics ambitioned to at least emulate, is unperturbed. Looks at the asteroid, sees it coming, and says, "There is nothing I can do to stop you. I will die." I'm not saying this is an easy thing to do, but it's an acceptance. Now, at the end of the day, the human species is young. It always depends a bit on how you want to define things, but about, give or take, 300,000 years ago, you get Homo sapiens. I'm not an anthropologist, it could be off a little bit, but something like that, about 300,000 years ago. We get humans, well, human-like bipedal creatures, right? Homo sapiens, walk upright, just like you and me, have brains that look very much, probably like yours and mine. We don't know exactly because brain matter is not fossilized. But anyway, based on their skull capacity, based on probably a brain a lot like ours. That's a few 100,000 years on a planet that's 4.5 billion years old, in a universe that is close to 15 billion years old. Human beings are nothing. We have only been around for a very, very short period of time. And look at the things we've accomplished. We have wiped each other out in religious wars. We have persecuted people for their skin color, their religious creeds, their genders, their sexual orientations, basically everything. We've done everything we could to wipe out whoever was different from us, which is a very depressing thought. But on the other hand, we've also accomplished great things. Although we have evolved to not have wings, we have made ourselves fly. We've made ourselves fly so far that we have put a member of a species on the moon. We have sent satellites far, far into the universe, far into our solar system, all the way to the edges of that. We have launched telescopes into space so that we can look at space from space. We've done all these things. There have been massive accomplishments too. And at some point, when our species ends, the balance will be made up, and maybe there will be another civilization at one point in time on this planet. Like, we followed the dinosaurs, we didn't overlap, we followed them. Maybe there'll be a species, maybe there are other life forms out there who will one day, long after the human species is gone, will find us and will study us and say, wow, they did some really stupid stuff, but they also did some pretty cool stuff. Look, they made themselves fly, and they made themselves sail, and they made themselves drive, and they had all that stuff going for them. And that's a comforting thought. At least I thought so. Whatever is inevitable by definition is that. It's inevitable. Whatever will happen will happen. And this is not to be confused with a certain passivity. There are certain things you can do, but unless you really want to donate to the Red Cross or go to the Ukraine as a mercenary right now, I don't know what many other options you have, right? It's great to wear yellow and blue clothes, and I think that's great, but at the end of the day, that's not going to stop the war there. But what I'm talking about is, what do you do to stay sane in this day and age? And for me, that thought helped a lot. What is inevitable, and is therefore outside of my control. I wish I could make a phone call to the Kremlin right now and say, you know what, you just shouldn't do this. And that over there they would say, yeah, you know what, Brown, you're right. Of course you're right. Let's pull out of the Ukraine immediately. I wish I could do that, but I know I can't. And beyond the things I've just said, beyond donating to the Red Cross or going there as a mercenary, and I don't think I would be much help to anyone as a mercenary, I don't really know what else I can do. But I can make sure that I myself don't collapse, that my inner citadel does not collapse, so that I am able to live another day. Until the day comes that there is no other day. And that's the way it is. And then it will be for others to make up the balance of our species. No, as soon as we are extinct, nowhere else will there be a human species. Maybe other life forms somewhere out there in the universe, but they will not be humans. That will be the end of us. And never again will there be a species exactly like us. But instead of making that a negative, you can make it a positive. Because that was my final conclusion. So if you approach this whole situation in the world right now, if you approach it stoically, what do you do? What do you do differently? What changes? And I realize nothing changes. Nothing changes. The principles that we've discussed in these videos that you can practice as a Stoic do not change. Whatever is outside of your control, you cannot change, and therefore must accept. Whatever is within your control, you can change, and therefore you are able to change it. And those two things should therefore not upset you, because if you can't change it, why let it upset you? There's nothing you can do. You're just ruining your life. Or if you can change it, well then change it, but not be upset. Learn that difference. Learn to make the distinction, and learn to accept. It's summed up, and that's what I'll end with, wonderfully by Epictetus in the, I'm pretty sure it's the Discourses, the more extensive work by Epictetus, not the Enchiridion, but he says, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't have the quote in front of me, but if it is now my time to die, I will die. But if it is not yet my time to die, then now I will have lunch, for the hour for lunch has come, and I will see to dying later. That is as sarcastic as we can get for Stoic humor. But it is very true. If the time has come for me to die right now, then I will die. And that's the Stoic way to look at it. Then I will die. What else can I do? It's my time to die. But if it is not my time to die, then I will now have lunch, because it's time for lunch. That is entirely within my control. I can make something here. I can go out and have lunch. I can have a great lunch. I can have the best lunch I've ever had. That's within my control. And that's the choice we have. The choice we have is to make the best out of every second that we have. Not every week, not every month. Every single second, we must live to our fullest. We must do what we can to be good people, virtuous people. And by doing that, until the bitter end, until the last moment for us has come, we're doing the right thing. By doing the right thing, that will be its own reward. The only fitting reward for virtue is virtue, in the words of Seneca. That's what we can do. So maybe instead of looking at this whole situation with great anxiety, which is fully understandable, you can look at it in a different way. Nothing changes. My moment will come when my moment will come. There's nothing I can do to stop it. But what I can do is be a good person. Do what I can to do good in the world right now. Not to be remembered by, not any of that, but because it is the right thing to do. And that's it. I wish you all a very good day, a good weekend, a good week. And let's try to take things one step at a time. I thank you for watching. And I, as always, welcome any comments that you have. We can do it. Bye.